So, Donnie, got to start off the show with a quick question.
Lay it on me.
LeBron or Michael? Who's the best?
You know what generation I come from. So, of course, I'm going to say Michael is the GOAT. And when it really comes down to championships, I think that is the defining thing that separates the two.
And Michael never lost a championship.
Now, I think in life, Michael might have been a bit of a womanizer, and LeBron's been with the same lady the whole time. So he may have gotten him there, but we're talking basketball. So I'll have to give it to MJ, even though I am a loyal Duke fan.
Yeah, we're not talking morals in this case. Not that that's something that shouldn't be admirable, but the crybaby stuff of LeBron is a little too much. And there's videos going around showing Michael get decked and get right back up, and LeBron getting touched by a ghost and flailing all over. And I really think that's a negative mark on his career.
For sure. He has no pride when it comes to that. And, think about the beast, the David Robinsons and Karl Malones, the just physical specimens that Michael Jordan had to win championships year after year against. And, not to say that some of these guys now aren't bigger framed guys, but I just think that those guys in terms of toughness were a different breed.
I agree with that 100%. And, it's bad when soccer players see LeBron take a dive and they're like, whoa, that was so bad. That was fake. They're mocking his dives.
The art of the flop.
Yep. All right. Well, this is the Carolina Contractor Show. And as usual, we just end up talking about sports. And that's not the topics we tend to focus an entire show on, but it sure is trendy and cool to talk about what a flopper and a crybaby LeBron is. I'm sorry, outside thought there, or inside thought just went outside. But what is the Carolina Contractor Show about? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory, I would think, in the title. We'd like to talk about building stuff and houses and maintenance and tearing down buildings with big machinery and building big buildings with machinery and things like that. Details are at the website, thecarolinacontractor.com. That's where you'll find kind of a bio about me and Donnie. My name's Eric Smith. I do inside sales for Home Builders Supply in Wilson and Greenville. Donnie, lovely, talented, as usual. General contractor, owner of SureTop Roofing, owner of Blanchard Building Company. And he's like the brains of the show. I'm the beauty of the show. And he's also pretty handy at a grill, right?
Yeah, that's a nice lead in. So if I had to pick one thing that I'd like to make money doing other than building houses, it would definitely be making food.
Well, that's what today's subject's going to be about, grilling. We titled it Get Out My Grill. We're going to be talking about all the things that come to grilling. And as we mentioned before, you know a lot about it. And I'll refer to you a couple times to this show as our resident grill master because you are. But this is like a sizzling debate, gas or charcoal grilling. We talk about this at work. And so we're going to look into those two methods, which tend to be most popular. And then we're going to also talk about other type of cooking that you can cook, the perfect steak or chicken breast. But I think of all the ways you can cook, pretty much, I think like 89% of all people who grill out or cook out use gas or charcoal. So let's just jump into this conversation, Donnie. Gas grilling, propane. Let's talk about Hank Hill and Bobby, that clean burning propane. What do you like about grilling with propane?
Convenience and speed. And I finally gave in and I bought a gas grill. I don't know. I do know. It was a year ago when we were finishing up filming the TV show. So we had a lot of folks over, had a tent event behind one of the houses we were flipping. And basically they told me that I would get to do my thing on camera. So I went and got a nice shiny gas grill and got everything set up. And of course the igniter didn't work right when I got it there. So I had to figure out how to light it with just a regular lighter, and everything went really good with that. But I still have that gas grill. And I would say when you're busy, especially if you're a family man or family woman, and if you have the kids and you have other things to do, I would say I would call a gas grill like a weekday grill. And I know we'll get to charcoal and those, but that's more of a weekend thing when you have time to prepare. But if not, I think it's a great thing to save time.
So when you light a propane grill, Donnie, do you still jump a little bit in anticipation?
Every single time. I still have to light it with a lighter, and I don't always have the long stem lighter. So yeah, every single time it gets me. And I tell myself I know what's gonna happen, but yeah, I jump like a girl.
It is one of the things I do too. It's just you're even with the clicker lighters on it, you kind of sit back and poof, it comes on, and you're like, all right, I'm doing good. Um, one of the things about cooking with propane, obviously, is even heat. It takes a little skill with charcoal, but propane, you turn it on, you got your grill filling with heat instantly. It heats up quickly, much easier to maintain that heat, and cleanup, I mean, is much easier because the grill still might be covered with food and whatnot, but you don't have to use something like a ash bin or to get rid of coals or worry about it after you've turned it off. When you turn it off and make sure the gas has been turned off, you're done. You're not worrying about amber sitting in the grill still hot.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually the one that I got has a heat shield between the burners and the grates of the grill. So that heat shield it does what it's called to do as far as it doesn't have direct heat necessarily, but it also is a catch-all, so it makes the cleanup a lot easier. And I can honestly say with my serious grill friends, that's funny. My serious grill friends, buddies, said, hey, we never use gas for anything, but from the convenience standpoint, you can't beat it. It's easy cleanup, like you said. And overall, when you weigh out the cost of charcoal versus the propane tanks, I still think it's cheaper to operate.
There's just a little freeze there, so I'm going to do a pickup here, man.
Yep.
One other thing One other thing to consider with propane is the cost. It's about we sell the propane tanks you can get, and they're about 50 new. A refill is about $22, so there is a cost. And when you run out of gas, you've got to go to some place that actually sells those. It's not as easy to find as say charcoal, and you also kind of have to have an idea in the back of your mind: how much have I used this tank? Because I used to have a gas grill, and we've all run out halfway through a cook, and you're basically done. Go ahead and throw it in the oven or on top of the stove, whatever you're going to cook, because by the time you go out and get a new tank and hook it up and get going again, you're basically starting from scratch. So you got to consider that getting a gas tank issue when it runs out.
Hey, speaking of that, a good tip in the area of gas grilling is if you're building a new house or if you have access to, say, you have a basement, you have access to the floor system underneath. We've done this in a lot of new houses, but you can actually run a propane line that connects to the rest of the gas from the house, especially if you have natural gas, which is much cheaper than propane. It's a fairly easy thing to do to stub out a gas line in your grill area. And everybody that has that said it is a total lifesaver because all those days of running that heavy tank back and forth to the store, or just like you mentioned, the inconvenience of the time crunch, if that does happen,
Mm-hmm.
that's a thing of the past. So it's cheap enough to do that. You're talking something that costs a couple $100, and it'll save you a lot of time, a lot of effort over the years.
Yeah, that's an obvious thing, and I didn't think about that, but it is more and more common. You're not seeing the big tanks being used quite as much. All right, let's go. We might sound biased here, but let's go over to charcoal. And this is, I think, the majority of people of the two types, their favorite. I'm going to take a poll at work with all the guys, but as you know, we grill out at work every once in a while, and Charles, our yard man, is the master chef there, and he uses charcoal. So the main thing is there is something about the taste when you use charcoal versus gas. There's something magical about being on top of some glowing coals. You can't replicate that with gas, and they're more affordable up front. A whole grill that's charcoal is much cheaper. And I've learned in the summer, smoke from a charcoal grill helps repel skeeters.
Yep.
Any drawbacks that you have, or a
Um,
disagreement?
no. I mean, I'm a charcoal guy, and I always preach that the heat source is dependent on, or the particular meat that you're cooking is dependent on the heat source for the best results. So things like burgers don't really matter. Burger and a gas grill is no problem because unless you make my burgers, which are step above, and the but the heat source is what's important for the type of meat that you're going to cook. So I use something called lump charcoal, and before I knew what this was, lump charcoal is the more expensive charcoal that you can buy at the big box store, or now they've started to carry at most grocery stores, but it's reusable. So whatever you don't use during that cooking cycle, you basically just intermingle it in with a new batch. And so it goes a lot further. It just lasts longer. So I wouldn't call it recyclable, but lump charcoal is definitely the thing. Another good thing about that is it doesn't have the gas. You don't taste any kind of lighter fluid on your food, which is a common thing when people use what's it called, match light or something. The match light it doesn't. I think it's terrible. I think you can taste it in your food, and if you're not serious about the barbecue thing, then that's not a big deal to you. But I would say charcoal is the king. And the thing about the drawback is that you can remedy that. There's a few things that you can do to speed up the process for the preparation. When I start my grill, I have certain things. I have something that grabs the grate of the grill, and then of course I hang it somewhere. I have an indirect cooking plate that goes between the charcoal bed and the grate, and so indirect is the way to go. And I'll elaborate on that a little more later. But basically that indirect cook allows you to walk away and go slow, and things that are okay cooked slow seem to be best with that grate in place. And had a guy I did some work for, and he said, "Man, I've got 5 children. I have to cook indirect, or I'll burn everything up that I try to prepare." But I also have a heat gun. It looks like a big curling iron type thing, but basically I keep my brown paper bags from the grocery store, and or I request those brown paper bags unless I just get too many. And I'll ball those up and put those under a mound of charcoal, and then I use that heat gun. It takes about 1 minute, and then when it starts to take the flame, basically the heat will penetrate to that brown bag, and it'll take over. So you don't have to stand over top of it. And my cycle goes like this: I will get the charcoal started. I'll go inside, and usually I'll prepare the meat about the same amount of time as it takes the charcoal to get going. But sometimes it's good to set a reminder. But yeah, that's the drawback. If you're not very patient, then charcoal might not be the thing for you. But if you get your process down, I think it's definitely worth it.
Now, there is one thing to consider, and that is safety. You're dealing with flames and hot containers and things like that. I was stupid. It wasn't an I was this many years old when I learned about the gloves and stuff. Do you have those barbecuing gloves?
No way, man.
You don't use it?
I don't want my
Your
neighbors to
bare
pick on me.
hand?
No, absolutely. No, not necessarily, but I'll use a tong before I will a glove. And I mentioned that indirect cooking plate. When you get it in place, you kind of lock in the charcoal in, so you really can't access it once that thing is in place. And I kind of have it set up where I really don't need the glove. I don't mean to jump in, but I want to say one thing. Another tip and trick is that when you're doing the meat prep, I basically buy my rubber gloves from the kitchen supply store, and I bought them there for, I don't know, 6-8 years. And I recently got on Amazon and bought a big box of the rubber gloves. Nitrile is what they're called. And those rubber gloves are super handy, especially if you're prepping a lot of different meat and you're going from one thing to the next. It really costs you a lot of time if you have to wash your hands every time you touch the chicken or every time you touch the pork. And so I wish I could say I thought of this, but one of my grilling mentors, Jay Starnes, name of his business is Fat Man and His Food, and he's done wonderful with it. And the dude is loved by a lot of people, but he's just a wonderful cook, and he's taught me so much. He layers his nitrile gloves, so he'll put 3 layers of the nitrile gloves on. So if you can imagine, you have a Boston butt and you're seasoning everything up, and then you finish that, but you've got to touch the pans and the seasoning and things like that. So you just rip that first set of gloves off, and boom, you've got a brand new set. After that, you have to hold it or handle it as you're putting it on the smoker. So then you've messed up your gloves again. You've got mustard or oil and all the rub on your hands. So you rip that off, and you've got a third set of gloves, and you're all clean again. And that is just one of the hacks that someone taught me that saved me a boatload of time.
So the moral of the story is, when touching your butt, wear gloves.
That's a really good way to put it. Yep.
Yeah, you knew I was going to take advantage once you brought Boston butt into the conversation.
Yeah, I could feel it coming.
Okay, so that's a personal preference he has. Let's go ahead and jump to that. Do you have any? We both come down on the side of preferring charcoal, but do you have any preferences of the way you like to cook? Again, resident grill master. I do it the easy stuff: burgers, chicken. For the family, you're more adventurous. Do you have some preferences of how you like to cook or what you do?
Yeah, I'd say any big cut of meat, the Boston butts, the ribs are something that are just a whole different ball game when you cook those on charcoal. And got a killer rib recipe. If we got enough time, I'll talk about that later. But I bought into the whole green egg hype, and I actually got the red egg, which is called a um, Kamado Joe. So the
Mm.
Kamado Joe was the first one, and there was a guy I did a lot of work for, and he sold these at his business, and so he had one that he was trying to move, and it was the big one. So I want to say it's the extra large, so 30 to 36 inches around, and it'll hold anything you want. It's a big cooker, and so I learned on that one, and I had it for about a year, and I thought, I don't like this thing. It's hard to operate. I can't get the results I want. And I had a buddy come over one night, and he was one of the people that got me into this grilling obsession. But he said, "Look, let me show you how to use the vents and control those." And with charcoal, the airflow and vent control are everything. So he taught me how to use the red egg, and man, I got results like I had never had as a grill guy. And after that, I was sold. And then the dilemma became that extra large egg was so hard to heat up. The prep time took, double what it would just a normal size grill. And like you mentioned earlier, I'd say 80% of the time I'm just grilling for my family. So I bought a green egg, and in comparison, it's probably half the size, half of the prep time for heating up the charcoal. But I will say this: Kamado Joe was a cheaper version of the green egg. I think they started selling those in the big box stores. Definitely know they sell them in like Ace Hardware, places like that. But I will say the working parts are far better on the Kamado Joe. I call it the red egg. So the red egg working parts, the vents and all that stuff uh, associated with the hinges, the vent cap on top, everything was a lot better than with the green egg. And I think green egg, I like my green egg, but I will say that maybe some of that is just the name, because some of the working parts I've had to change out. I've had to change the gasket out where the top and the bottom meet, but I'll say that the working parts are definitely cheaper in the green one.
Do you use any of those, anything wireless or Bluetooth?
Oh, no doubt. So I got the coolest thing I got for Christmas this year was a wireless meat thermometer, and it talks to my phone. It's so intuitive that you can program in what cut of meat that you're cooking, and it has pre-programmed in the target temperature. So it will tell you. You basically say, "I'm cooking this many pounds of this meat," and it will tell you what the target temperature should be. It talks to your phone, and it has a hub almost. So the case that it actually you store it in talks to the meat thermometer, and the case has a strong battery, so it's able to communicate with your phone really no matter where you are in your house. So it's not one of those things where if you're in the kitchen and your grill's outside, there's a connection issue. But I'll say that especially if you're getting started, and something that will foolproof the process is definitely a wireless meat probe. And I just have one. I have one that you can add a few to, but if you're serious about getting started with this, and want to be the grill master of your house, I'd recommend getting a 2-pack or a 4-pack, because you can operate with several cuts of meat cooking simultaneous, and it will guide you through the process.
Going back a little bit, Donnie, when we're talking about charcoal and airflow and how important that is, people may not realize how to use those side vents, when to open the top, if they've got a
Mhm.
top vent, how to use it. But there are now blowers some people use. Do you have one of those, or are you familiar with blowers for charcoal grills?
Oh, no doubt. And so what they're talking about there is basically like a wireless DeWalt blower that you would get, something that operates off the same battery that your drill would use, for instance. Anything like that, or the charcoal torch that
Like,
I mentioned earlier that I use, it looks like a curling iron. Anything that puts out airflow, you can basically stick that in the bottom vent of a green egg, or anything that you need to increase the temperature, and you can hit it, especially if you're trying to hurry the process up, and you don't want to wait on that charcoal to go through the process of turning orange like it needs to be. You can hit
mhm.
it with that battery powered blower, and I recommend a small one, because of course a bigger one would make a mess and blow the ashes and everything everywhere. But a small battery pack blower can cut your cook time down by 10-15 minutes. So yeah, I keep that around the grill area for that, and just for keeping everything cleaned off. I mean, we just got on the other side of pollen season here, and I think a
Yeah.
battery powered blower pays for itself really quick.
Very cool. One other tip, definitely have as a grill caddy. Everybody needs some place to put their stuff. Clean up your tongs and spatula and whatever you're using after you cook, because it only takes a couple minutes. But there's nothing like getting ready to grill out and your stuff still coated from last week or 2 weeks ago. So go ahead and get a grill caddy. Invest not in super expensive or designer grilling tools, but you can get some nice ones that'll last a long time. What shoot, let's be honest, you can do it with a fork and from the kitchen if you need to, but it just makes it a little bit easier. Um, Before we run out of time, I'd like to talk about some other methods, because gas and grill are common. You and I've made it clear we like charcoal. There's just something about it, but there's some other things. I've never used an electric smoker. I don't have one. Then I know several people who like it. Do you have one?
Oh, I'm on my fourth electric smoker. I'll wear those things out. And, the way I got into this is maybe in 2014 or 15, I had two or three people simultaneously tell me, "Hey, dude, you need a hobby. You work all the time, and I'm terrible at golf. I don't hang out at the bars, so it's like, what can I do? What can I do to maybe feed my family?" And of course, we live in the country. We're not too close to a grocery store, and you spend a lot of money when you go out to eat these days, especially now. It wasn't as bad then as it is today, but um, I'll never forget. I bought an electric smoker, and someone told me that they did really good with the Boston butts, and with Boston butts, low and slow is the name of the game. And so if you're going to cook anything for 16, 18, 20 hours, it's one of those things where in your mind you visualize that being a heck of a task. You've got to babysit that thing all day long and stay up late at night or get up really early in the morning and start the process. Well, electric smokers make all that go away. When I got my first one, it's about the size of a dorm fridge, and they're $150, or they were. Side note there, if
Wow.
you go to one of these liquidation places that basically buy bulk things and sell it to the public at a good price, I've seen electric smokers in there several times for $100, and
Oh.
it doesn't have to be a very fancy one. But basically, what an electric smoker is an outdoor oven that burns wood chips. So it helps to have it undercover. You'll be able to keep it for a lot longer. But you could put a Boston butt on. When I do it and I'm planning for the next day, whether it's lunch or dinner, I usually plan it for dinner, and I'll put a Boston butt on, say 8 or 9 o'clock the night before, and I'll feed it wood chips until I go to sleep. And the reason that is after the temperature of the meat hits 165 degrees, all the pores are closed and it can't absorb any more smoke. So once it hit 165, you're wasting your time putting more wood chips in there unless you just want to smell them outside of the smoker. But I would say an electric smoker is what changed the game for me. And had one summer, the first summer I had it, I grew all the vegetables and I cooked about 20 or 30 pounds of meat. So I had about 40 plus people come over, and I fed that many people for under $40 or $50, and that was everything. So I was sold after that, and so my obsession began. And
That is
yeah.
that is awesome. And I remember you telling me about feeding half the world with just a couple cuts of meat. Now, Donnie, you turned me on to something that you discovered several years ago, the sous vide, and it's weird on how it works, and it's also weird how sometimes it looks. But it's French for under vacuum, and it's a technique where the food is put in a plastic bag that's vacuum sealed, and you can season it and treat it, and then it's a bath basically, and it's not a boiling bath; it's a warm bath, but it cooks the food evenly, and it's super moist. It's super tender. Just imagine a steak that you can cut with the side of a fork, but it's kind of freaky looking when you first try it. And you got one and you liked it so much you got one, and it works. It just is a weird thing. You want to explain that real quick how you've used it?
Yeah. So I bought one of the sous vide cookers, and it looks like, I hate to keep using the curling iron example, but it looks similar to the thing that lights the charcoal grill.
Hmm.
It's like a curling iron with a timer on the top. And
Hmm.
I went, Anova, it's ANOVA is the brand that I think they sell it at Target, but I bought everything on Amazon, and I have the container that actually has a hole cut out for that. And people would say, well, you could just use a pot and it's no big deal. And I wanted to do it the right way. So I bought the smaller container, And like you mentioned before, you vacuum seal it. But when you vacuum seal it with butter, all the salt, herbs, anything that you want to inject flavor into that cut of meat. And the beauty is, like with chicken, you dry chicken out easy if you overcook
Right.
it. So you can't dry anything out because none of the moisture can escape during that part of the cooking process. The only drawback I would say is that you have to sear the meat. So basically, you're cooking it before
Mhm.
the searing process, and you have to use another pan. But the cleaning process, the ease of the cleanup makes up for that by a long shot, because you basically pour the water out and put it in the drying rack, and you're done. But I will say that restaurants that have real chefs in the kitchen, they use sous vide for cooking all their steaks and fillets. And I used to cook a fillet in a cast iron pan, 2 minutes on each side, and I'd pop it in the oven about 350 for 6 minutes, and that changed the game for my family. But when I got the sous vide cooker, you cook it in that bag with butter, several of the herbs, kosher salt, and some things like that, and it would be really hard for you to put a steak on the grill again, because it's a game changer. And I think the coolest thing I ever cooked in sous vide is I bought a 15-pound brisket. And I hate to give Walmart the credit here, but I think Walmart has the cheapest brisket by the pound. And 15-pound, I had to buy the big sous vide container. So, this thing's maybe 24 inches across, maybe even bigger than that. But I cooked it for 48 hours, and it was amazing. When I took it out of the cooker, I had to put the brisket on the green egg, and I had to char both sides for about 3 hours. And it basically made the best brisket I've ever had. And if you're going to spend the money on something like a brisket, 70, $80, then cooking it right is the thing. I messed up a mini brisket trying to learn the cooking process, and I'll just say that it's the hardest cut of meat to get right every time. But I made my grandmother's mashed potatoes. When I finished the brisket in the sous vide, I poured the drippings from it into a pan and made gravy from the drippings. My grandmother's
Mhm.
mashed potatoes, like I mentioned,
Whew.
and the best brisket I've ever cooked. You do that once, and you'll never let that sous vide out of your sight, man.
And the sous vide starter kit, you can find them on Amazon, which will include the little plastic container right now, running about 45 bucks. So if you want to try that, it's very cheap to get involved in sous vide cooking. And it looks weird. You do want to sear that beef cut after it comes out, but it is a much easier way. And like you said, the cleanup is really good.
If you want to search that, the way it's spelled is SOUSVIDE, by the way. I know we say it funny. I don't even think we say it right. I think we say like the redneck version. And yeah,
Well,
anyway, but sous
where
vide,
do we
whatever.
live, bro?
Yeah, exactly.
Surprise. Get a beer and me, and this accent will come out much, much stronger. Last thing I want to do here on the Carolina Contractor Shows, we're talking about grilling and cooking out, is induction cooktops and ranges. This is the latest cooking tech. Um, there's a saying, good, quick, cheap, pick any two, but you can't have all three. You've used that when it comes to building things.
Yep.
Um, the induction cooking is so cool. Some people may have started to see commercials for it. It's electricity and magnets. They heat up your pots and pans super fast, but the stovetop stays cool. And you'll see videos where someone has a pot on top of this induction cooking system, and the water's boiling, and they slide the pot off, put their hand on the spot, and there's no heat right there. It stays cool because, again, it's the magnets are the master of this heating process. I do think you have to have some special cookware. Have you experimented with induction cooking?
So no, but I think that's going to be the next thing that I get. I'm going to do a kitchen upgrade in the next year or so, and which will be fully documented on the Carolina Contractor social media sites. But it just seems really cool. It works. It heats water faster than gas. So when you said good, quick, and cheap, usually you can only have two of the three. I think this is the first thing that meets all three of those. So I'm a fan. I have heard that if you have a pacemaker, that's the only real drawback that I've heard, is that it can interfere with things like a pacemaker, and that makes perfect sense from the electromagnetic transfer of energy and that side type of thing. But and the other thing that you mentioned is you have to have special cookware with a magnetized bottom. It does work with cast iron, so I'm already a cast iron guy, and I think it's going to fit in my house nicely.
Yeah, one of the other cons is the tops are easy to scratch. So I saw a video where someone put what looked like a normal kitchen hand towel on top of that put the pot on top of the towel and it still boiled the water. Another pro, it doesn't heat up your kitchen the same way because you don't have 3 or 4 stove tops on generating heat that's never even used because it just is inefficient. So it's very efficient that way. But I'm with you. I've seen the videos of this induction cooking, and it looks fantastic. Some people are making their entire counters have that system in place. So anywhere they put the pot, the AI or smart part of the induction top will know where you've moved the pot to and move the heat with it automatically. So imagine you're boiling something on top and you need to push it out of the way to the far corner. You don't hit any switches. You don't change a burner. It automatically shifts over to that pot and continues to cook it however you want to do it. We're short on time, Donnie. Real quick, pellet cooker. Are you a fan or not?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. All my grill guys, grill buddies, grill friends, whatever you want to call them, I would say that the pellet cookers are what gets made fun of the most. And it's not because it's bad. It's not because it's bad. It's easy to use. If you're not an experienced griller, then it may be a good starting point, but they're awful expensive just to learn on. And I'm not saying anything bad about it or you shouldn't have a pellet cooker because a lot of people swear by them. But I'm thinking, buddy, like, let's have a cook off here, because what it really comes down to is it yields the worst results. And I think that, I've had Boston butts from a cheap electric smoker that would smoke, no pun intended, the results from an electric smoker all day long. I mean, a pellet smoker all day long. I'm just not a fan. I've had several cuts of meat from those, and it's one of those where I guess if everybody's drinking beer, it all tastes good. But I'm a tough food critic, and I would say a pellet smoker would be last on my list.
All right, then I'll ask the final question. You're on your desert island. You can only pick one of the styles that we talked about. What would you pick?
Oh, no doubt, charcoal all day long. Yeah, charcoal.
Yep.
Charcoal will see you through. If there's a power outage, my girls and I made the cookies on a charcoal grill, and I was the hero with no power in the house, and it's just a good thing. I think that learning how to cook on charcoal is an art, but it's worth the time spent.
I agree 100% with that. So it doesn't matter what team you're on, but charcoal is where all the cool people go. So if you're going to be grilling out, and a charcoal grill is really cheap to get some of those. So team gas, team charcoal, even you pellet people, we like you. We're not abandoning you. You go ahead and cook that way. And okay, we'll probably snicker behind your back, but we're definitely entering the time of year where it's fun to grill out. So if you don't have anything to grill out, go look at a yard sale. You can buy a used charcoal grill sometimes for pennies on the dollar, and boom, throw in some briquettes and start grilling. It's a great thing to do. Who was the guy we talked to a couple years ago? Roger Mooking.
Yep.
He's a big proponent of going out and just grilling and cooking stuff outside, and I agree, it's a fun thing to do.
We need to get him back on the show. He came out with his own line of grills and things like that, and dude, he was just a fun guest. I like that guy.
Get up in my grill part 2. We'll have to contact Roger and have him on again. He's a great interview. All right, well, we appreciate you guys tuning into the Carolina Contractor Show. Get outside and grill this spring and this summer. It's a fun thing to do, and we'll give you some tips, and Donnie's got some recipes. We'll put those up on the Facebook site and on the website. Again, the website for that, the address for that website is thecarolinacontractor.com, and we hope to see and